The real fear in hospitals lies in the gaps between heartbeats, in moments when reality takes a coffee break, and in things that security cameras record, but no one wants to admit. What I learned during my last week at Metropolitan General is this: some places don't just collect medical records. They collect much more dangerous things. The incident I'm about to tell you happened to 3 different people in 3 different parts of the hospital within the same 72 hours. Everyone involved underwent multiple psychiatric evaluations. All security systems were working perfectly. All witness statements matched perfectly. By the time you read this, I will have started working at a desk job on Monday. You will understand why. The strange thing about the incident is that the 3 people mentioned did not know each other beforehand. They did not visit the same doctors, they were not staying on the same floors, and they did not even arrive on the same day. Yet somehow, their experiences were interconnected in a way that challenges everything we thought we knew about coincidence. Story 1. The girl who came back. Look, I've been working admissions at Metropolitan General for 6 years, and I've seen every type of patient walk through those doors. Overdoses, car accidents, heart attacks, psychotic breaks, you name it, I've processed the paperwork. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened when 17-year-old Emma Harrison was brought in on a Thursday night in November. My name's Sarah Chen, and I pride myself on being the kind of person who pays attention to details. You have 2 in this job. 1 missed allergy notation, 1 incorrectly entered insurance code, and suddenly you're dealing with lawsuits and medical emergencies. So when the ambulance crew wheeled Emma through our doors, I noticed everything. She was conscious but completely silent. Her parents, David and Linda Harrison, were following behind in a state of absolute panic. The paramedic, a guy named Tommy Rodriguez who I'd worked with dozens of times, looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Sarah, this one's different," Tommy whispered as they transferred Emma to a gurney. We found her standing in the middle of Riverside Park at 2 a.m., completely soaked from the rain. But here's the weird part. She was bone dry when we loaded her into the ambulance. What do you mean bone dry? I mean her clothes, her hair, everything. It was like she'd never been in the rain at all. But we all saw her standing there, soaking wet, just staring up at the sky. I started processing Emma's intake paperwork while Dr. Jennifer Walsh began her examination. Standard stuff: name, address, insurance information, emergency contacts. But when I asked Emma for her social security number, she looked at me with these incredibly sad eyes and said, "I don't think I have one anymore." Her parents immediately jumped in with the correct number, but something about the way Emma had said that made my stomach drop. Like she genuinely believed she wasn't real anymore. Dr. Walsh completed her physical examination and couldn't find anything wrong. No injuries, no signs of drug use, no indication of sexual assault. Emma's vital signs were perfect. Too perfect, actually. Her heart rate was exactly 60 beats per minute. Her blood pressure was precisely 120/80, and her temperature was dead on 98.6 degrees. "Emma, can you tell me what happened tonight? Your parents are very worried about you." Emma stared at the ceiling for almost a full minute before responding. "I died, Dr. Walsh, at 11:47 p.m., but then I came back." Her mother started crying immediately. "Emma, honey, you're not dead. You're right here with us." "No, Mom, I'm really not." That's when things started getting strange. Dr. Walsh ordered a full workup: blood tests, CT scan, MRI, the works. While we were waiting for the results, I was updating Emma's file when I noticed something that didn't make sense. Our computer system showed that Emma Harrison had been a patient at Metropolitan General before. 3 times, actually. But according to the dates, her previous visits had occurred in 1987, 1995, and 2003. Emma was born in 2006. I figured it was a glitch in our system. Maybe someone with the same name had been treated here before. But when I pulled up the old files, I found photographs. It was the same girl. Exact same face, same hair, same build. The Emma Harrison, who had been treated for pneumonia in 1987, looked identical to the Emma Harrison lying on the examination table in 2023. Dr. Walsh came back with the test results, looking confused. "Sarah, I need you to run these tests again. There must be some kind of error." "What kind of error?" "Emma's blood work shows that she died approximately 4 hours ago. Her cellular activity is consistent with early-stage decomposition, but she's sitting up, talking, and showing normal cognitive function. That's impossible." "I know, but look at this." She showed me Emma's brain scans. Instead of normal neural activity, the images showed what looked like electrical interference patterns, like someone had tuned a television to a dead channel and tried to map the static. Around midnight, Emma asked if she could use the bathroom. I walked her down the hall, and that's when I noticed that she wasn't casting a reflection in the mirrors we passed. Not just a faint reflection, no reflection at all. When we got back to her room, Emma's parents were gone. "Emma, where did your mom and dad go?" "They left, Sarah. They had to." "What do you mean they had to?" "Because I'm not really their daughter anymore." I tried to explain that to them, but they couldn't understand. So they left to go find the real Emma. I immediately called security to check the parking lot. David and Linda Harrison were sitting in their car, crying. When Officer Martinez approached them, they insisted they'd never had a daughter named Emma. "Officer, I think you're confused. My wife and I, we've been trying to have children for years, but we've never been able to. We don't have a daughter." Martinez radioed back to me. "Sarah, these people genuinely believe they've never had kids. I've seen a lot of things, but this is new." I went back to Emma's room, but she was gone. Not discharged. Gone. Like she'd never been there. Her bed was perfectly made, all her test results had vanished from our computer system, and her intake paperwork had completely disappeared. But here's what really messed with my head. When I checked the security footage from that night, it showed me admitting a patient, but the gurney was empty. The cameras captured me having full conversations with thin air, processing paperwork for nobody, and walking an invisible person to the bathroom. The next morning, Dr. Walsh called me into her office. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Do you remember admitting a patient named Emma Harrison last night?" I told her everything I could remember. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Sarah, according to our records, no one named Emma Harrison was admitted last night, but I remember her too. I remember examining her, ordering tests, getting those impossible results." She pulled out a newspaper clipping from November 15, 2003. "Local teen dies in Riverside Park." The article described how 17-year-old Emma Harrison had been found dead in Riverside Park after apparently wandering away from her home during a severe thunderstorm. The photograph accompanying the article showed the same girl I'd admitted 20 years later. "But Dr. Walsh, if she died in 2003, how could we have treated her last night?" "I don't know, Sarah, but I've been doing some research. And Emma Harrison appears in our hospital records every 16 to 18 years. Going back to 1923. Same girl, same age, same circumstances. And every time, the staff who treat her remember the experience, but all physical evidence disappears within 24 hours. As I was leaving her office, Dr. Walsh grabbed my arm. "Sarah, there's one more thing. I called Riverside Park maintenance this morning. They said they found something strange near the spot where Emma was discovered in 2003. "What kind of strange?" "Every year, on the anniversary of her death, someone leaves a hospital bracelet at that exact location. Always the same bracelet, always with her name and patient ID number from Metropolitan General. Who leaves it? That's just it. The security cameras show the bracelet appearing, but they never show anyone placing it there. It just ... materializes." I went to Riverside Park that afternoon, and sure enough, there was a patient bracelet tied to a tree branch near the pond. The name read Emma Harrison, and the patient ID number matched the one I'd assigned to her the night before. But according to our computer system, that ID number had never been used. Story 2. The monitor that showed too much. My name's Kevin Thompson, and I've been an ICU technician at Metropolitan General for 9 years. I maintain the life support systems, monitor the equipment, and make sure everything runs smoothly when people are fighting for their lives. It's demanding work, but I've always found comfort in the predictability of machines. Ventilators breathe at set intervals, heart monitors beep in steady rhythms, and for pumps deliver medication at precise rates. Everything was logical, measurable, and controllable. Until I encountered bed 7 during the night shift from hell. The patient was a 45-year-old businessman named Robert Chen, who'd suffered a massive heart attack. He'd been in our ICU for 3 days, unconscious and on full life support. His wife, Margaret, had been keeping vigil by his bedside almost constantly. Around 10 p.m. on that Tuesday night, I was doing my routine equipment check when I noticed something odd about Robert's heart monitor. The display was showing normal, vital signs, heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen levels, all within acceptable ranges, but the waveform pattern looked wrong. Instead of the usual irregular peaks and valleys you'd expect from someone in Robert's condition. His heart rhythm was displaying perfect sine waves, not just regular mathematically perfect. Like someone had programmed a computer to generate the most ideal cardiac rhythm possible. I figured it was a calibration error, so I reset the monitor. The perfect waveforms immediately returned. "That's weird," I muttered, making a note to have the biomedical engineering team check the unit in the morning. But then Margaret called me over. "Kevin, is it normal for the monitor to show 2 different heartbeats?" I looked at the screen. She was right. The display was showing Robert's vital signs, but in the bottom corner, there was a second, smaller waveform running in real time. "Mrs. Chen, I've never seen that before. Let me check the system." I ran every diagnostic test I could think of. The monitor was functioning perfectly. According to the technical specifications, it was only connected to Robert's sensors. There was no way it could be picking up signals from another patient. But that second heartbeat was definitely there, and it was getting stronger. Around midnight, things got really strange. The second waveform suddenly spiked, and every monitor in the ICU started displaying the same secondary signal. All 12 patients were showing dual heartbeats on their screens. I called my supervisor, Janet Torres, who'd been doing ICU work for over 20 years. "Janet, you need to get down here. Something's happening with the monitoring equipment." When she arrived, the secondary waveforms had synchronized. All 12 patients were showing identical dual heartbeats. Perfectly timed, like there was some kind of phantom patient connected to our entire system. "Kevin, have you checked for electromagnetic interference? Sometimes cell phone towers or radio equipment can cause false readings." "I've checked everything. This isn't interference, Janet. Look at this." I showed her how the secondary heartbeat would respond to changes in the room. When Margaret adjusted Robert's blanket, the phantom waveform would spike. When she spoke to him, it would speed up. When she left the room, it would slow down. "It's like something's monitoring our patients' emotional states," I told her. "That's impossible, Kevin. These machines don't have that capability." But around 2 a.m., the impossible became undeniable. The secondary heartbeats started displaying on the room's main wall monitor, the big screen that shows vital signs for all ICU patients simultaneously. But instead of just showing waveforms, it began displaying what looked like brain scan images. Real-time neural activity, but from brain patterns I'd never seen before. The images were incredibly detailed, showing synaptic firing patterns that seemed to correspond to the emotional states of our patients' family members. When Margaret was crying, the phantom brain scans showed areas associated with grief and loss lighting up like Christmas trees. When Mr. Patterson's son was arguing with nurses about his father's treatment, the scans displayed intense activity in regions linked to anger and frustration. "Janet, this equipment is somehow monitoring the families, not just the patients." "Kevin, that's medically impossible. Our sensors only have physical contact with the patients themselves." That's when the wall monitor started displaying text messages. At first, they looked like standard system notifications. Patient status update. Vital signs stable. Medication administered. But then the messages became more specific. Margaret, CHEN. Emotional distress detected. Recommendation: increase sedation for patient comfort. Family member experiencing anticipatory grief. And then, most disturbing of all, patient Robert, CHEN consciousness detected. Patient is aware but unable to communicate. Patient is experiencing severe psychological distress. Margaret was sitting right next to Robert when that message appeared. She immediately started talking to him, telling him she was there, that everything would be okay. And the monitor responded. Patient acknowledges communication. Patient wants to respond, but cannot. Patient requests family remain present. Janet and I stared at the screen in shock. Robert had been completely unresponsive for 3 days. According to every medical test we'd run, he was deeply unconscious with minimal brain activity. But the messages continued. Patient, aware of conversations. Patient remembers all interactions. Patient has important message for family. Margaret was crying now, holding Robert's hand and begging him to give her a sign. That's when every monitor in the ICU displayed the same message simultaneously. I love you. Don't be afraid. It's beautiful here. The room went completely silent. All the usual ICU sounds, ventilators for pumps, heart monitors, stopped making noise. It was like someone had hit a mute button on the entire unit. And then Robert's eyes opened. He looked directly at Margaret and smiled. But he didn't speak, didn't try to remove the breathing tube, didn't show any of the typical responses you'd expect from someone regaining consciousness after 3 days. He just looked at her with this expression of complete peace and love. The wall monitor displayed one final message. Thank you for staying with me. I'm ready now. Robert's heart rate began to slow. Not the erratic decline you'd see with cardiac arrest. A gentle, steady decrease, like he was consciously choosing to let go. Margaret held his hand as his vital signs gradually flatlined. But instead of the usual alarms and chaos that accompanies patient death in the ICU, everything remained perfectly quiet. As Robert's heart stopped, the secondary waveforms on all 12 monitors disappeared simultaneously. The phantom brain scans vanished, and the text messages stopped appearing. But for just a moment, right before all the monitors returned to normal, every screen in the ICU displayed the same image. A perfectly clear photograph of Robert standing in what looked like a beautiful garden, smiling and waving goodbye. Janet and I stood there in complete shock. When the other nurses and doctors arrived for the official pronouncement of death, they found nothing unusual about the equipment. All the monitors were functioning normally, showing typical post-death readings. But Margaret told us something that made my blood run cold. During those last few minutes, Robert squeezed my hand 3 times. Once for I, twice for love. 3 times for you. We'd worked out that signal years ago, back when we were first dating. He hadn't used it in over 20 years. But Mrs. Chen, Janet said gently, Robert couldn't have squeezed your hand. The muscle relaxants in his system would have made voluntary movement impossible. I know what I felt, Margaret replied. And I know my husband was talking to me through those machines. After Margaret left, I spent the rest of my shift reviewing the security footage from the ICU. The cameras showed Margaret holding Robert's hand, talking to him, and crying. But they didn't show any of the messages on the monitors. According to the video, the screens displayed normal vital signs the entire time, but I know what I saw. Janet knows what she saw. And somewhere in the Metropolitan General Computer System, there's still a record of those impossible messages. The next morning, I tried to access the monitor logs from that night. Every computer in the hospital told me the same thing. No data found for specified date and time, but sometimes, late at night, when I'm doing equipment checks, I'll catch glimpses of that secondary heartbeat on the monitors, and sometimes, just for a second, I'll see text messages that shouldn't be there. We remember everything. Consciousness never ends. We are still here. I've learned not to tell anyone about these incidents anymore. But I've also learned that sometimes, when people are dying, they find ways to communicate that have nothing to do with medicine or technology. They find ways to tell us that love persists, even when everything else fades away. Story 3. The car that couldn't leave. My name is Lisa Rodriguez, and I've been working as a parking attendant at Metropolitan General Hospital for 4 years. It's not glamorous work, checking permits, directing traffic, helping people find spaces during the chaos of medical emergencies. But it pays decent, and honestly, I liked the routine. Same shifts, same people, same problems. At least, that's how it was, until a silver Honda Accord showed up in our east parking lot and refused to follow the laws of physics. The car arrived on a Wednesday morning in December. I remember it clearly because it was snowing, and the driver, a woman in her 30s, with dark hair, seemed completely unprepared for the weather. She was wearing a light summer dress and sandals. No coat, no umbrella. I watched her park in space, E47, and run toward the main entrance. Nothing unusual about that. People park here every day to visit patients, and they're often stressed, distracted, inappropriately dressed for the weather. But that Honda never left. I mean that literally. For 3 weeks, that silver Honda sat in space E47, and despite my best efforts, I couldn't find any record of who owned it. The license plate came back as belonging to a Rachel Morrison from Portland, Oregon. But when I called the number listed in the DMV database, it was disconnected. The address didn't exist. According to every official record I could access, Rachel Morrison had never owned a car, never had a driver's license, and had died in a house fire in 2019. But the Honda was definitely there, taking up a parking space, accumulating snow, and somehow paying its own parking fees. Let me explain that last part, because it's where things got really weird. Our parking lot uses an automated system. You take a ticket when you enter, and you pay at the machine when you leave. If you stay longer than 24 hours, you have to pay additional daily fees. After 72 hours without payment, we have the car towed. But according to our system, the Honda's parking fees were being paid. Every day, at exactly 11:47 a.m., the payment machine would register a transaction for space E47. Cash payment, exact change, no receipt requested. The problem was, I watched that machine every day. Nobody ever approached it to pay for the Honda. The payments just appeared in the system. After a week of this, I reviewed the security footage. The cameras showed the Honda arriving, and the woman in the summer dress getting out and running toward the hospital. But they never showed her leaving the building or returning to pay for parking. More disturbing, the cameras never showed anyone else approaching the Honda. But every morning when I came to work, the car looked like it had been recently cleaned. The snow would be cleared off the windshield, the ice would be scraped away, and sometimes there would be fresh flowers on the dashboard. I reported this to my supervisor, Marcus Chen, who'd been managing hospital parking for over a decade. Lisa, just have it towed. If the owner wants it back, they can deal with the impound lot. Marcus, I've called 3 different towing companies. They all say the same thing. When they get to space E47, there's no car there. What do you mean, no car? I mean they show up with the tow truck. They look at space E47, and they tell me it's empty. But I can see the Honda sitting right there. Marcus came out to look for himself. We stood in the parking lot together, and I pointed directly at the silver Honda. Lisa, there's nothing in that space. Marcus, are you serious? It's right there. Silver Honda Accord, Oregon plates, covered in snow. He stared at the empty space for a long moment, then looked at me with genuine concern. Lisa, I think you might be working too many hours. Maybe you should take a few days off. That's when I realized that not everyone could see the Honda. Over the next few days, I conducted an informal experiment. I'd ask visitors and staff members to tell me what they saw in space, E47. Most people said it was empty, but about 1 in every 10 people would describe the silver Honda in perfect detail. The people who could see it all had one thing in common. They were visiting patients who were dying. Mrs. Patterson could see it while her husband was in hospice care. Tommy Rodriguez, the paramedic, could see it during the week his mother was in intensive care. Dr. Walsh could see it the day before her. Elderly patient in room 412 passed away. But as soon as their loved ones died, the Honda would become invisible to them too. I started keeping a record of who could see the car and when. The pattern was undeniable. Visibility correlated with proximity to death. The closer someone was to losing a family member or patient, the more clearly they could see the Honda. 3 weeks after it first appeared, I decided to approach the car directly. It was unlocked. The interior was immaculate, like it had just been detailed. But sitting on the passenger seat was a hospital bracelet with the name Rachel Morrison and a patient ID number I didn't recognize. I took the bracelet to the admissions desk and asked if Rachel Morrison was currently a patient. No, said Sarah Chen, the intake coordinator. But that's strange. This patient ID number was assigned yesterday to a woman who died during surgery. Catherine Walsh. She'd been asking about someone named Rachel right before she went into the operating room. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Sarah, what did Catherine say about Rachel?" She kept asking if Rachel was okay, if Rachel had made it to the hospital safely. She seemed convinced that Rachel was in a car accident and needed help. But Catherine's family insisted that she didn't know anyone named Rachel. That evening, I stayed late to watch the Honda. Around 11:47 p.m., exactly 12 hours after the mysterious parking payment appeared. Each day, something incredible happened. The Honda's headlights turned on, the engine started, and I watched as the car slowly backed out of space, E47. But there was nobody in the driver's seat. The Honda drove itself through the parking lot, stopped at the exit gate, and somehow triggered the automatic arm to lift. Then it turned onto the main road and disappeared into the night. The next morning, space E47 was empty. But around 10 a.m., a different car appeared, a blue Toyota Camry with Washington state plates. And at 11:47 a.m., the payment machine registered a cash transaction for that space. I ran the license plate. The car belonged to David Kim from Seattle, who had died in a motorcycle accident 3 months earlier. But his sister, Jennifer Kim, had been admitted to Metropolitan General the night before with complications from cancer surgery. The pattern continued for months. Cars belonging to dead people would appear in our parking lot, driven by invisible drivers, paying their own fees, and remaining visible only to family members of dying patients. I tried to explain this to Marcus, to hospital security, to anyone who would listen. They all thought I was having some kind of breakdown. But then Dr. Walsh approached me one day with something that changed everything. "Lisa, I've been doing some research about your parking lot phenomenon. I think I understand what you're seeing." She showed me historical records from the city planning office. Before Metropolitan General was built, our east parking lot was the location of Pine Hill Cemetery, which operated from 1923 to 1967. When they moved the cemetery to build the hospital, they relocated all the headstones and remains. But according to the records, several graves were never found. The assumption was that the records were incomplete. "Dr. Walsh, what does that have to do with invisible cars?" "I think some people, when they're dying, send out a kind of ... call. And the people they've lost, the ones who are already gone, they try to answer that call. They try to come back, to be present for that final moment. But why cars? Because that's how we travel now. That's how we go to the people we love when they need us. Even death can't change that instinct." She paused, looking out at the parking lot. "Lisa, every car you've seen probably belonged to someone who died wishing they could have been at the hospital with their loved one. And somehow, they're still trying to make that journey." I quit my job at Metropolitan General the following week. But before I left, I did one final experiment. I left a note on the windshield of the latest mysterious vehicle, a red pickup truck that belonged to someone's deceased father. "We see you. We know you're trying to help. Thank you for not giving up on the people you love." The next morning, the note was gone. But in its place, someone had left a small bouquet of flowers and a handwritten message. "Love never dies. It just finds new ways to travel." Sometimes I pass by Metropolitan General just to check on the east parking lot. The mysterious cars are still there, different vehicles, different stories, but the same impossible love that refuses to accept the certainty of death, especially on the brink of a particularly difficult day. I see my grandmother's old Buick in parking spot E52, and I know that she is still watching over me, wherever she may be.